Hey guys, my name's Katie. I'm a BSW intern at the Metropolitan Children's Advocacy Center, and I'm here to tell you about my field experience and the competencies and how they fit into my field experience. Okay, so the first competency is to identify as a professional social worker and conduct oneself accordingly. So at my field agency, we take kids that have allegations of abuse and we interview them in a child-friendly environment. And also at the agency, they have a medical side to it where they can get medical exams and see if there's anything telling on their bodies about the abuse that's being alleged towards them. So, with doing that, part of what we do is we post with the parents or whoever it is that brought the child. And when you do that, you have to introduce yourself and tell who you are and what role you play in the investigation process. So I always like to introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Katie, I'm a BSW intern, I'm just observing. The second competency is to apply social work ethical principles to guide professional practice. So part of that for me was, if you guys remember, we took that personal value assessment at the beginning of this class. And I like to reflect back on that and just kind of look at that and see how my values kind of interact with the people around me's values, whether it be coworkers, clients, anything like that. And I like to see if my values are causing any kind of bias or any kind of judgment that I may feel. And I like to reflect on that and talk through it with my field instructor, who is usually very understanding, and she will kind of walk me through the process and ask me why I'm thinking that way and find me resources as to why society has maybe programmed me to think that way. So it's actually a very good learning experience because I know that in order to be a good social worker, you have to rely on your own values a lot of the time. Competency 3 is to apply critical thinking to inform and communicate professional judgments. So what I do for this one is I like to pay attention to the things that we learn in class and make connections between what I'm seeing at field. So for instance, if there's a case that I think maybe this has some ethical dilemmas in it, then I can go and talk to my field instructor and say, okay, so here's what I would do based on reading the NASW Code of Ethics. This is how we were discussing going through the ethical decision making in class, and how do you think I should proceed from there if this were to turn into something? And then I would take her advice and apply it to what we've already learned in class, and then I would have myself an answer. The fourth competency is to engage diversity and difference in practice. So where I'm interning, we will interview kids from all different kinds of backgrounds, whether it be different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, different religions, different kinds of upbringing. Like some kids that we get are raised in military families. And part of that is you have to kind of realize that how you grow up isn't always going to be the same as how they grow up. And that when you're dealing with these kids, you have to kind of take a step back and look at things from their perspective. So with doing that, we've learned that maybe some kinds of corporal punishment is used in, I've noticed it more in African American families, more in military families, more families like that are often a little bit stricter on their kids. I've noticed that they'll often turn to corporal punishment, and sometimes it can get a little bit out of hand, and then it's just an accident. You don't mean to take it a little bit too far. But when they do that, when we're posting with the parents or whoever it is that brought them, we kind of plant the seed and say, hey, corporal punishment has come out in recent years that it's not always the best practice, and it's better to use positive reinforcement for your kids instead of hitting them. And because sometimes that can create a kind of sticky situation where you actually do take it a little bit too far and someone actually ends up getting hurt, and then you have a whole other mess on your hands when you have to get DSS involved, you have to get law enforcement involved. And so it's best to just kind of keep your hands to yourself, keep that role as a parent and as a child, and to just use positive reinforcement for a way to, I guess, train your kids. Moving on to number 5, advance human rights and social and economic justice. So, as we all know, children are considered a vulnerable population, according to social workers. So, that's pretty much all our agency deals with is kids, teens, and anyone under the age of 18. So, we're kind of giving the voice to the children who won't often have as strong of a voice in court, we're kind of helping them to navigate through the legal process if that's the route that needs to be taken. We kind of stand up to them for their parents and their caregivers. And with DSS, we help facilitate some coordination with DSS, and it ends up being very helpful because, the children, they get overlooked a lot, and we just want to help in any way we can. Number 6, engage in research-informed practice and practice-informed research. So something that my field instructor usually does for me is she'll send me an article related to child abuse or forensic interviewing, and she'll say, hey, read over this and let's talk about it in our next supervision. So I'll up and read the case, and then I'll jot down some notes, and I'll say, hey, this is kind of weird, I didn't know this, and we'll kind of discuss it together as a team with the other intern that works there with us, and we kind of discuss what we think about it and how we think that it could be best practice, or maybe there needs to be more research put into it before we actually implement it. Number 7 is to apply knowledge of human behavior in the social environment. So something that they usually do in forensic interviews is to, when you're kind of getting to know the kid and you're kind of building some rapport, you ask the kid, oh, so where do you live? What town do you live in? What do you live in? Do you live in a house, a trailer, an apartment, whatever? And so then they'll give their answer, and then they'll say, okay, who lives in the house with you? Is it you? Your mom's there? Your siblings are there? Grandma's there? Your uncle's there? Whoever it may be that lives in the house. And so what I like to do with that information is to kind of just build from that and from what I'm hearing throughout the rest of the interview in order to gather kind of a sense of what kind of environment they're living in. Is it more totalitarian? Is it more something where the kids are able to just kind of do whatever they want without having to worry about their parents? Number 8 is to engage in policy practice to advance social work and economic well-being and to deliver social work services. So last year I had the opportunity to go to the State House with my field instructor and the other intern at the time, and we met with the South Carolina Attorney General, and he was talking about child abuse and his experiences with it, and pretty much just saying, you guys do a fantastic job at what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing, keep servicing these kids, keep helping these kids, because, you can save a life one day. And so I thought that was really cool, because part of that, we were also able to discuss concerns with the Attorney General, and he seemed like he really liked to listen to us and hear what we had to say, and it was nice to know that someone higher up on the government food chain kind of had our backs and was willing to listen to everything that we had to say, and would be able to take that back to the appropriate channels that are higher up in government that we don't always get to interact with. Number 9, respond to contexts that shape practice. So I like to watch the news a lot. I listen to everything that they're saying, and I especially pay attention to stories involving child abuse, human trafficking, anything like that. And I kind of hear what the news has to say with it, hear what witnesses have to say, hear what officials have to say, and just kind of take it all in and kind of relate it to what I'm doing in field and say, oh, if this child were to come into our agency, how would it be handled? What would the interview be like? And then I can discuss that with my field instructor, and she can often offer some guidance. Going on to the last one, finally, is to engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. So this one's a little bit more difficult for me, as I usually do not have any kind of interaction with the client themselves. The most interaction I have is sitting in on the post-interview meetings with the parents or their caregivers or whoever brought them. And so with that, I like to watch what whoever is interviewing the child does. So the first part of the interview process is to basically build rapport, and so the interviewer will usually ask the kid, oh, what'd you do this weekend? Do you have any plans for this weekend? And what are you learning in school? Do you like school? That kind of thing. And just talk to the kid, kind of get a feel for them. And then when they're ready to, they kind of move gently into the interview and just be like, hey, so just tell me what you want to tell me. Like, there's nothing that's off limits here. Tell me whatever you think you need to tell me. And then the interviewer will often ask questions in a non-leading way. And so they ask open-ended questions like we learned about in our other classes. That's good to do because we don't want the kid to feel like we're pressuring them to say anything. And then for intervention, a lot of times there will be DSS workers or law enforcement there watching the interviews with us. So they're pretty much the interveners, and so our field instructor or whoever's doing the interview will come into the room that's across the hall from the interview room and talk to us and be like, okay, so is there anything I missed? Anything you guys should ask about? And then she'll just take suggestions for the from the multidisciplinary team that's watching it, and she'll take it back into the room and just be like, continue to ask some questions, and finally they'll wrap it up, and that's pretty much the end of it. We usually don't get to find out what happens to the child beyond that. Sorry, my cat's trying to get in my closet. So sometimes I wish that we could actually follow up with the kid and see how they're doing, see what's going on, but once they leave our office, unless there's a need for a follow-up interview, that's usually the last that we see of them. Thank you guys for watching my vlog. This is my cat, Rhea. She says thank you as well, and she loves you. Bye!